Hi guys, Asmo here, and this is my guide for the Fireball build. Very simple Fireball build that manages to basically do all of the content in the game. I made this character in a couple of days, and then I completed the Uber Elder fight, the Maven fight, Awakener level 9 Cyrus, all of the maps that you can imagine. The character is very smooth and easy, and it's basically a follow-up to the guide I released recently for leveling a witch with Fireball in like a really simple, quick and efficient way. So this build doesn't really have too many bells and whistles, but it's a very efficient and simple build that deals a lot of single target damage and has very comfortable clear and can do all content in the game. So what more can you want from like a very simple, beginner friendly as well build? I'm gonna explain first the playstyle of the build, and then we're gonna move on to the skill gems, the gear, the passives, and anything else that we need to talk about. So basically the playstyle is very simple. While you're clearing maps, you're using GMP, and then you also have Ignite proliferation support, and that is spreading the ignites. You hit multiple targets and it's very comfy, and you can also use Val Fireball. And for some of this footage there's probably like a sextant that reduces the soul gain prevention for Val skills, so I can sometimes spam this Val Fireball if I have the right sextant, and it feels very nice. Otherwise it feels very nice for like breaking legions. It can clear legions very easily because it just melts everything. The amount of damage that I have right now is really high, even with GMP, so the clear feels extremely smooth and very quick, considering we don't really have any like speeding mechanics, but everything just dies super quickly and super easily. So the character is very comfy for mapping, very easy to play. And then for single target, we can swap the GMP for Awakened Swift Affliction to do even more damage, and I swap it for like very single target heavy fights, such as for example Cyrus, such as the Maven, but I did not swap it, for example, for Uber Elder. For Uber Elder I did with GMP because simply there are too many adds in that phase and you want to hit everything at the same time. So it's actually much nicer to do that with GMP because you don't have to worry about aiming the single fireball and making sure that it hits the right target. GMP makes it a little bit easier to play. But for a single target, when you have the Swift Affliction, in order to maximize the damage, you put the Flame Wall, Wave of Conviction and Stormbrand, and then you ignite with the Fireball. And Ignite deals insane damage because the enemy will have like ridiculously low resistance, and I'm gonna talk about that in a second. But that's basically the playstyle. The character has a lot of single target damage, pretty good clear, and it's actually pretty squishy because it doesn't have many defensive mechanics. If I wanted to, I could fit into this build, for example, like Rumi's Flask for extra block. It has some block from passives and some block from the stuff that we're wearing, and it can also get pretty easily to 7k HP. That is a pretty decent amount of health. However, it still lacks other layers of defense, so I would still say that even with 7k HP, this is a squishy character, right? This is a squishy character despite the fact that we have the Primal Aegis, despite the fact that we can have 7k life, despite the fact that we have some block. This is still not what I would consider a tanky character. However, it can do all content despite that because of the overwhelming amount of damage. This is a very simple build to follow. If you wanted to league start with this, I'm gonna give you like a recommendation for what I would do in the beginning. So I would basically follow the leveling guide that I have released recently and do that until you get 2 maps. And then what you want to get is, you want to get the Searing Touch. That would be your weapon of choice to get started with. And you want to try to 6-link that as soon as you can. You also want to get the Malachai's Artifice Ring. This is an insane damage boost, especially when you combine it with the Eye of Malice. Both of these items are very cheap. The Searing Touch is also actually not that expensive at all. But it will cost you a bunch to 6-link it, of course. So Eye of Malice, and then you also want to get the Calm's Heart. Those are the unique items that you want. All of them are pretty cheap. They're not expensive to get. The next pieces of gear that I would get would be probably getting Pierce on boots. So you definitely want Pierce of boots because it will help your clear immensely. So you want to get Hunter Influence Boots, and you want to get Pierce, Projectile Spears to additional targets. You can also get elevated mods elevated mod that goes up to 5 pierce, like pierce 5 targets, and that is really, really nice. And then if you can afford it, you also would like to get Ignite, so you inflict deal damage 10% faster. That's a massive DPS boost for this character. So this is like a really, really good pair of boots because it has res, life, 35 movement speed, and these two mods that we need. In terms of the ring, you really are looking for cursed enemies with elemental weakness on hit, or you can also do flammability on hit. Either one will work just fine because you simply will socket the other one in your Wave of Conviction setup. So that's what you want for the ring. Just life, dexterity will be definitely helpful so that you can level the GMP a little bit higher, but it's not that necessary. You can work without it. And then of course life resistances. And then for the amulet, you would like to get +1 to level of all fire skill gems. If you can, get +1 to level of all intelligence skill gems. And then if you can, on top of that, get fire damage over time multiplier and fire damage, increased fire damage, and then some resist, life, stuff like that. In terms of the anointment, I recommend anointing the Burning Brutality, which is down here in the passives. Burning Brutality makes it so that ignites you inflict deal damage 8% faster, plus 8% damage over time multiplier. This damage will give you more DPS than, for example, something like the Breath of Flames or the Heart of the Flame. So this is the highest damage node that you can anoint, Burning Brutality. And it's actually not that expensive because it's only like the teal, violet, purple or something like that. So that is very, very easy. For a belt, you basically just want life and resist and maybe increased elemental damage. Make sure that you do not get the added fire damage to spells. You could get added fire damage to spells against ignited enemies, and for example get it on a Stygian Vice, and then you can get a jewel that has like fire damage while wielding a two-handed weapon and like more fire damage to spells. However, all of those things are gonna mess up your elemental equilibrium with the Stormbrand, because the damage fire damage will be added to your Stormbrand, and then it will mess up the elemental equilibrium and you will lose insane amount of damage. Like if I did that, if I added some fire damage here on the belt against burning enemies and also on that jewel, I will actually lose about 2 million damage from that. Just pure loss of like 2 million damage. Actually, no, I would actually lose more, probably lose like 4 million damage or 5 million damage. This would be a huge loss, so you don't want to do that. The Malachi's Artifice is actually massive damage increase for a single target here. And then for gloves, I have insane gloves. My gloves are insane, but don't worry about it. You don't need gloves like this. You probably couldn't get gloves like this most likely. Just get gloves with life, res, and some fire damage over time multiplier. It's very easy. I have gloves like that in POB actually. There is a POB that has all of the items that you pretty much want to go for in the beginning, and it has just fire damage over time multiplier, life, and resists on the fingerless silk gloves, but you don't actually need the fingerless silk gloves. The spell damage, increased spell damage, will actually not help you, so ignore that. It's just the fire damage of the overtime multiplier that you really want. And the unnerve, calling strike, all of that, just ignore that. It's not gonna give you that much actually. It doesn't benefit this build that much. So all you want is pretty much like the fire damage overtime multiplier. That's the most important thing on the gloves. In terms of the flasks, definitely get Cinder Swallow Orn. It's very, very, very good. It increases the damage that your enemies take when they're ignited by you, which you ignite them all the time, so it's basically like almost 10% more damage. And then we've got the Diamond Flask, because I want to have more consistent Elemental Overload procs. That's why I'm using Diamond Flask, and it does make a big difference. I notice it, and it definitely is worth using if you want to maximize your damage. But if you want to get more defense, then I recommend, for example, Roomies. And that's it. I didn't even bother rolling all of the flasks because the character just breezes through everything. So now let's talk about the gems. For gems, for maximum damage, you want to get Fireball as high level as you can. So ideally level 21, 23 quality Val Fireball. The Val Fireball aspect of it is very, very useful, especially like I said, for clearing legions and just for like being a little bit faster while clearing. Then you want to do Awakened Burning damage, and of course get Burning damage before you can get the Awakened one, right? Before you can get Awakened version, just get the regular version of the skill. You can also get Awakened Unbound Ailments, Awakened Deadly Ailments, Awakened Swift Affliction, and regular Ignite Proliferation. The Ignite Proliferation is one of the priorities and it will definitely help you a lot. Plus it's one of the best damaging links because it's just 39% more damage plus 10% increased fire damage. Very, very good support for this skill. And then we've got the very, very important Wave of Conviction setup, which I'm gonna explain in a moment, but for now I'm just gonna mention what it has. Wave of Conviction, Awakened Hextouch level 5, flammability and combustion. If you cannot afford the Awakened Hextouch, you simply get something else. You can get like a chest with extra curse and a bunch of life and res. That would work just fine. And then we've got Smoke Mine with increased duration, Flame Wall, and Arcane Surge. And all of the skills like Arcane Surge and Flame Wall and Smoke Mine will benefit from the increased duration. It's very, very comfy to use that. And then we've got Vitality, Scatterbots, and Malevolence, together with the Enlighten level 4, so that they take up less mana. And that's it, plus Stormbrand in the ring. In terms of the way that we're scaling the damage, naturally we're just getting like fire damage, elemental damage from nodes like Divine Judgment. We're getting these little clusters of like this little wheels of like Explosive Impact and Holy Fire. They add a lot of damage. Elemental damage naturally scales this. Fire damage, damage over time multiplier. And then eventually you want to go into Cluster Jewels, which ideally you want to get Prismatic Heart, Burning Bright, and Widespread Destruction on a fire damage cluster, but it's not completely necessary. I'd say just aim to have the Burning Bright. That's the most important one because it's fire damage, fire.multi, and AoE. Very, very good node. And then other than that, I guess like Prismatic Heart would be the best. And Widespread Destruction is not necessary. You don't need to go for anything expensive. Just make sure it's lowest amount of passives, right? Like 8 passive skills, and one of them is Burning Bright and then something else good. Not that important to be like Widespread Destruction and stuff like that, because that makes it much more expensive. So you can just make something much cheaper. And then and second large is exactly the same. And then the mediums, you want to make sure that you get the fire.multi and you get Burning Bright with Cooked Alive. The Cooked Alive, the chance to ignite doesn't matter because we ignite 100% of the time, but the enemies ignited by you have minus 10% to fire resistance, and with the helmet that we're using, that actually is minus 15. And on top of that, they also stack. So the more of them you have, the lower the resistance of the enemy will be, and the better that is for you. So all of them are the same. If you want, you can also swap one of the Burning Brights for something like Brush with Death for some extra recovery. And then for the medium jewels, for the crimson jewels that I have here, for just the jewels in the jewel socket that I have, you are looking for fire damage over time multiplier, increased maximum life, and fire damage. This will be all you need. And you can find these for like a couple of eggs. You can also just, until you get those, you can just look for life and increased fire damage or something, or like life and resist. It will definitely help you a lot. This is basically what I have in all of them, just increased fire damage, fire.multi, and percentage increased life. Just like we have here, increased burning damage on this one as well. Here we have some extra dex because I needed that. And then we've got some fire damage, couple of res, fire.multi, and maximum life, and extra cast speed on a synthesis base, but that's not necessary. And that's basically all you get in all of these sockets, and it gives a lot of life. You can get a lot of resists, stats, and a bunch of damage from those. So that's the cluster jewels. The cluster jewels make a big difference. So how are we scaling the damage to make it so so huge for such a low investment that we can have? Because you can have pretty much like very cheap items. You don't need like the expensive gloves or the expensive amulet or boots that I have. Even if you have a lower investment, you still will have pretty high damage for what you're doing. And it's just the fireball. And the way we're scaling the ignite, because it's fire damage, is by shredding the resistances of the enemies. So keep in mind that stats like penetration do not apply to ignite. So for example, the damage penetrates 6% fire res will not apply to enemies, but the resistance reduction is affecting it. So the lower the fire resistance of your enemy, the more damage he will take from ignites. So how are we reducing the damage, the resistance of the enemies? We are using Wave of Conviction, which gives us 25% exposure, right? And then as we are exposing, we're also getting the Elementalist 25% on top of that, so that is 50. Then we're using Elemental Equilibrium from the ring, that is another 50, right? So that is 100. And then we're using the Combustion, that is 119. Then we're using the Flammability, that is, if we're counting like a Cyrus, for example, but let's say not a Cyrus for now, let's say a normal character, or maybe let's do a Cyrus. So Cyrus will only be affected by this at like 1/3 of its strength. So 1/3 of 48 would be like 10 plus 1/3 of 18. What is 1/3 of 18? 6, right? So 16. So it'll be only 16. So let's say that's like 30, right? 32 with this curse as well. So that is 30. That is another 50 that we have here, right? So that's like 150. And then we have also the cluster jewels. That is 190, right? So we have a little bit more than 190, but let's count it 190 roughly of elemental resistance shredding, right? So the enemy will have like minus 190 resist. And if we, like taken from whatever resist they have, if we look at Cyrus resistances or like Shaper or whatever, they have I think 50. So that is minus 140, okay? And then this gets multiplied by the Eye of Malice by 50%. So minus 140 plus 50% of that, that is 70, right? So that would be minus 210. So Cyrus, after you Wave of Conviction Cyrus and he gets hit by the Stormbrand, he will have negative 210 fire resistance, which is absolutely insane. Negative 210 fire resistance will basically triple the damage that you're dealing from ignites, right? Because you're getting like it's getting multiplied like 200. It's insane. It's a massive amount of damage that you're getting from this. So it's definitely something that you need to do for single target. You basically leave the Stormbrand, leave the Flame Wall, and just Wave of Conviction and then shoot the Fireball, and the boss just takes insane amount of damage. So that is how we are able to scale the damage so high without that much of an investment. And this is a mechanic that you can use for anything, right? If you wanted to, you can use it for lightning damage, or you can use it for cold damage with the respective curses and skills, right? But it's really, really nice because Combustion allows you to reduce the resistance further with just applying that from Wave of Conviction. So everything works very, very well in conjunction together to shred the resistances so low. The character is very nice to play if you just don't know what to do, if you're like a beginner, if you're like, I want to play a Fireball, I want to play something simple, something easy, then I definitely recommend that. It scales pretty well into the late game. It can be played on a budget. It doesn't require that much investment early on. It has a like one straightforward mechanic that basically is the shredding of the resistances. That's the only thing that you understand, that you have to understand, and it will teach you something about the game as well while playing it. So definitely something pleasant. I'm not gonna like league start with this or anything. It's not like an S tier build, but it's definitely very nice to play, and I recommend it if you're looking for something really, really simple. So that's it. Thank you guys for watching. You can also check out right now in the description, I'll put a link to the Nexus. I've partnered with Nexus so that you guys, if you're interested in buying some POE microtransactions, if you're looking to buy some armor sets and stuff like that, it's available in there, and I get a small cut from that. Basically all content creators are partnered with Nexus and the GGG if they want now for a deal like that, so you can check that out. Otherwise, check out my stream at Asmodeus Stream on Twitch, and thank you guys for watching. See you next time.